Hello, I'm hoping that you can all hear me out there. Um, Today I wanted to do a video on the impact that social media is having on our consciousness and how it affects the way we interact with one another. Um, and, you know, I think that when it comes to activists, it can play out in ways that is not necessarily the most beneficial to the cause or whatever you want to call it. And I think it's actually inhibiting our ability to communicate with others. So, I did a little bit of research on the impact social media is having on people, and I found a few really interesting articles on this. One thing that really stood out to me was the studies that have found that social media is also, I guess, they're finding that people who use social media the most are developing narcissistic tendencies. And narcissistic personality disorder involves a preoccupation with the self and how one is perceived by others. Narcissists pursue gratification from vanity and the admiration of their own physical and intellectual attributes. So an example of this with social media is quite obvious. We have people that are obsessed with their image on the internet, and they're constantly taking photos of themselves and updating their life, and they do this in order to receive admiration or compliments from their profile followers. And whether or not that is subconscious, that is still a trait that I guess lends itself to the idea that they are actually developing narcissistic tendencies. And also, this goes the same for people who would consider themselves intellectual and may not necessarily use Facebook to update people on their lives, but may use it to argue. And they're not arguing to find a common basis of understanding between two opposing views, but arguing to make points. And there's three levels of argument within classical metaphysics, and that is: one, it is using logic and reasoning to find a common ground between opposing sets of views or opinion. Two, using logic and reasoning to prove your opponent wrong. And then three is trying to prove your opponent wrong by any means necessary. But anyway, the signs of narcissism are unilateral listening, which means listening only to dismiss, negate, ignore, or minimize, or otherwise make someone else's concerns irrelevant. A preoccupation with the self, which is acting selfishly and, if being generous, generally only responsive to their own concerns. Being above the rules, feeling that they are above others and that the rules don't apply to them. An inability to take criticism while having an inflated idea of their own importance, which can be quickly deflated by negative criticism. There's also a refusal to take responsibility and a tendency to blame others for things that go wrong. And there's also another trait, which is quick to anger, where people may become easily angered by critical comments or by being ordered what to do. The more I uncovered this, I found a study that was conducted at the Western Illinois University, which compared participant scores on the narcissistic personality inventory to Facebook use. And the researchers found that those who are more self-absorbed reported more activity on the site. And it also went further and found that today's college kids are 40% lower in empathy than their peers of 20 or 30 years ago, with the biggest drop occurring after the year 2000. And I think after the year 2000, that's really when you start to see the internet becoming more and more prominent, internet use becoming more and more prominent in the younger generation. So the study said that modern students are significantly less likely to agree with statements like, "I often have tender, concerned feelings for people less fortunate than me," or "I sometimes try to understand my friends better by imagining how things look from their perspective." One factor that one of the main researchers pointed to is that the contact with media noting that the average, this was done in the United States, that the average American is exposed to three times more network-related information than they were 30 years ago. Much of the content of modern media is also heavily saturated with violence, exposure to which could lead to a drop in empathy. The researchers also identified the hyper-competitive atmosphere and the inflated expectations of success that have arisen from phenomena like reality TV shows as contributing to a social environment that works against slowing down and listening to somebody who needs a bit of sympathy. He then goes on to say that students' lives have become so focused on promoting themselves that they don't make the time to empathize with others. So it is personally my belief. Actually, I might share a few more facts on this just to drive the point home. Some other facts I found were that 24% of people that were surveyed in this one particular site, 24% of people missed important events in real life because they were too busy trying to share them on social channels. In another survey, 51% of respondents said they check social network sites at dinner. And another fact that ties in with how self-obsessed we've become, there are 90 million self-portraits on Instagram, and there are over, 50 million photos uploaded to Facebook a day. Personally, it's my belief that the pervasive influence of social media, combined with a culture of competition and scarcity, is driving humanity in a way that rewards psychopathic narcissistic behavior, as we are driven to compete for attention as we market our individual brand. Remember, we're living in hyper-competitive atmospheres, and we're driven by the need for attention. We have a scarcity-based attention-seeking mindset. We are mimicking the behavior of the institutions that drive humanity from the top, namely the corporations that are driven to pursue profit at any cost, regardless of the consequences. This is what I now term the corporate personality, the ultimate ego, which exists in complete separation from reality. It is the capstone on the pyramid of the modern ego, in which its entire identity is associated with the creation of its image. And I'd also like to point out that, as I say this, that I don't think social media is inherently a bad thing. It's just a tool, and ultimately it depends on how people choose to use it. The purpose of media is to inform people of contemporary issues that affect them, as well as the global issues that affect us as a collective. When mainstream media fails to accurately report on these issues, or ignore them altogether, which they do a lot of the time, it's the responsibility of the individual to inform their peers of these issues so that they may develop informed opinions on these facts. Think of social media as a community notice board where you're swapping important information, saying, somebody might have something that they need assistance with, and they have their online community, people that they may know, that they have a really strong relationship with, where they can exchange information, ideas, products, whatever they need. There's a saying that I quite enjoy that goes, small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, and great minds discuss ideas. And, I think if we're conscious of that when we're using the internet and we're using social media, we can avoid the traps of falling into narcissism. So I want to expand on this a little bit more with how this relates to activists. The way in which we interact with one another at this current point in time is based on the need or desire for attention, which in itself is a manifestation of the scarcity mindset. And I've noticed quite a lot when I've gone to protests, or whenever I've kind of been in a gathering of like-minded people, there's almost this need for people to have to swap information, It's a case of my information is better than your information, and I need to get out everything that I want to say all at once, and I need you to listen to me, and I want everybody to listen to me and to what I have to say. And I don't think that's really necessary. We're all, when you're in a gathering of like-minded people, you are all in the same boat. We're all doing our research, and we should learn to let go. um, it's to me what is happening right now is we're actually creating a true counterculture from the ground up in every social interaction that we have. And in order to do that, we have to come from a place of letting go and not needing to control the interactions and simply just allowing the collective reality to manifest. Many of us who would call ourselves activists and truth seekers in our journeys, we've become more aware of the nature of reality and consciousness, and that is we recognize that we are the universe experiencing itself and that we are actually collectively co-creating our reality from moment to moment. All of consciousness is just a frequency, and we are just one small strand of it. And time itself is just an illusion. There is no past or the future. There's only the present moment. I think it's imperative that truth seekers, activists, and anarchists explore the techniques for experiencing higher states of consciousness. Without the understanding that you are the universe, and so too is everything that you experience, we will continue on our path of separation, domination, and control, because we'll be unable to recognize and connect to that essence in others. And I think unless we have that, a lot of the other lessons or the method of letting go is just not going to happen. I think too often we activists, because of our moral crusade, and the same goes for me too, I've done the same thing many times where I get on my high horse. We feel the need to control or guide conversations to our issues that matter, particularly when it comes to people who may not necessarily know as much about these issues that we do, or people who have no interest in it whatsoever. We always want to go to the serious conversation. We want to inform people and let them know, like, do you know what's going on in the world? Like, do you understand? Like, all of it is a sham. The system is a fraud. Blah 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 blah. While I certainly see that it is of noble intent, if this discussion isn't voluntary, where you're forcing this conversation upon somebody else, then it's coercion. And it's a coercive act that holds the same essence as the coercive oppression of the state, the very thing we're trying to fight against. You're creating a war against a war. One lesson that I've learned recently from interactions with people and the new friends I've made is this particular ethos. And I think if people follow this ethos, then they're going to find that interacting with people is a lot easier. And that is, interaction between all beings should be voluntary, non-coercive, and non-hierarchical. And I want you to think about how that is implemented in your day-to-day life when you interact with others, even when you get together with your friends or with your family. It means that we don't always need to feel like we have to contribute to a conversation just because we're in the same space with people. We should feel free, even if we're in the same space with people, to do what we like, provided that they have the understanding of that, I really think it's important to make clear that freedom is a psychokinetic skill. It's not an abstract noun, it's a process. It's a movement, not a form of governance. Think of yourself as a spiritual nomad, and this kind of process of always being aware of who you are and realizing that every interaction that you have with somebody is voluntary, and recognizing that everybody that you're interacting with on the ground level is also the universe experiencing itself, that can provide a model for an everyday life of spirituality or anarchism or whatever. I think people just need to learn to let go. Sit back and enjoy the space that you're creating, and create an autonomous zone that provides an opportunity for freedom of expression for all who might choose to participate in it. Just see that your lives are simply running together in parallel in that present moment. And offer that space of abundance and see it as a gift rather than a commodity. You know, you will be you'll be with that person again, like when the moment arises. You don't need to force everything into that one interaction. And I think that's really important to avoid the cycle of complaining and pessimism and negativity that I think is often quite prevalent when anarchists, or not anarchists, but activists get together. And that's no way for us to interact with one another. We're only perpetuating the same problem by needing to force like this fear and this anger and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't express our anger. You know, on the contrary, I think we should. But we're going around in circles if we're trying to interact on the ground level the way we've been programmed to. We need to break that programming and try more radical forms of social interaction. And I will talk about this a little bit more. You know, if you come together with a group of like-minded people, realize that together you're co-creating a collective reality, and that when you're in a group like this, you can move away from the war, from civilization and the revolution and the myth of scarcity. See it as a fluid interaction between beings, and just allow yourself to just be in the moment. And what does it mean to be in the moment? It means to do what you love, and simply just enjoy the presence of the people around you. I think the activities of such groups will be the basis for real barter and exchange, and creativity will become highly valued in these sorts of counterculture gatherings. I realized probably last week that the nature of creativity is actually no different to the attainment of the Zen state. And many ancient traditions talk of the Zen state as a means of pursuing enlightenment. And I don't think that creativity is any different. When a human being realizes the fulfillment of the creative state, whether it's poetry, painting, playing music, or dancing, or attaining a state of mastery within a particular skill, his awareness is in the moment, and his focus is solely in the act of creation. It's not thinking of the future, it's not thinking of the past, but it's actually completely in the present moment. And I really think that that is the birthright of humanity. It's the highest realization of who we are as sentient beings that have the capacity to create and to mold and to shape reality. And you know what? I think that it's a potential path for human beings to pursue enlightenment. And I don't think that the pursuit of enlightenment necessarily has to include dogma or about imposing beliefs on people, but it's a radical state of self-awareness in all moments of what it means to be human. What would the world be like if we collectively chose the path of enlightenment, if we collectively chose to pursue what we're truly passionate about, what actually has us in the present moment, not thinking about the past or the future, but completely in the now. And like there's that famous video on YouTube, The Science of What Motivates Us, where they talk about the study conducted by economists, where it found that any task that required cognitive reasoning or abstract thinking, that monetary incentives didn't actually work anymore. The factors that led to better performances were autonomy, which is our desire to direct our own lives, mastery, our wish to get better at things, and purpose, the feeling and intention that we can actually make a difference in the world. And I think creativity is something that is innate in humanity, and we are always trying to find ways to be creative, and what that video tells me is that traditional systems of reward and punishment are completely incompatible with the creative process. And that has profound implications for how we organize society, because societies throughout history have always relied on reward and punishment as a means to control people and to elicit particular behavioral patterns, desired behavioral patterns from people. And it's very interesting that creativity actually begins to degenerate when you try and impose reward and punishment systems. I'm absolutely fascinated by this because it's blocking creativity, and I found a really interesting article about this a few days ago about how creativity is blocked. And one thing that really stood out to me, and it's from a book called Creativity, Order, and something else, by a guy called David Bohm. And he was saying that in instances where a child or a human being is unable to express their creativity, it actually becomes destructive. They become very agitated and dissatisfied, and they act out in destructive ways, often very violently as well. And think about how different society would be if we actually honored the creativity in people, and how different human interaction would be, where people actually had the right and the freedom to express themselves creatively, and they weren't hindered in that. I think we would have a very, very different idea of what humanity would be like if we had that. So, to top it all off, I think that's about all I wanted to talk about. So, number one, be aware of how social media is affecting your interactions with people, and don't feel like you need to control conversations or to try and be someone that you're not, or whatever, in order to acquire social currency, in order to kind of, market who you are, your brand, to bring people to your social media page. And I'm not saying that people do this implicitly, and for a long time I did the same thing, where I wanted to get people talking. I wanted people to like me because I wanted people to care about the issues that I cared about, which is the freedom of humanity, blah 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 blah. But when you realize that it's ultimately the same kind of coercive act as the kind of oppression that you're fighting against, you kind of take a step back and go, oh, okay, whoa, that's really serious. So be aware of the corporate personality and how it may be affecting your interactions with people. Next time you hang out with your friends, see what happens if you don't try and control the situation. And I'm not saying that any of you do out there. Just when you come together, don't feel like you have to have conversations or have constant conversation when you hang out. It's okay to get together and play music, make art, do poetry, watch funny videos on the internet, like do your own thing while you're together. And thirdly, I want you to think about what I was talking about, where if you are the universe experiencing itself, think about how serious it is for you or somebody else to coerce somebody else into your worldview. Coercion. Think about that. We are the universe experiencing itself, and how does that play out from moment to moment? That is, all interaction between all beings should be completely voluntary, non-coercive, and non-hierarchical. I think that's pretty much all I've got to say for now. I hope what I talked about makes sense. Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a good day.